Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out to the final talk in the 2021 series of How Do We Go Forward? How Do We Go Back? My name is Dr. Fen Kennedy. I take they, them pronouns, and I am joining you from the stolen land of the Akahannock, Assateague, Choptank, Delaware, Mattapique, Nanticoke, Piscataway, Pocomoke, and Shawnee tribes, now known as Maryland. How Do We Go Forward? How Do We Go Back? Began as a way for us to think about returning to dance in the fall of 2020. And for this final talk of 2021, I invited the speakers of 2020 to reflect on their year's experiences, their successes, their challenges, and their hopes for going forward and back. I'm going to ask all of our speakers to give us a little introduction, and then we will get started. So let's go with Amelia. Just tell us who you are.
My name is Amelia Stewart. I take she, her pronouns. I just graduated from the University of Alabama and I'm returning as an MBA, MFA dual degree candidate.
Oh, why don't you also share your topic from last year if you remember it?
I don't remember, but I have a feeling it probably had something to do with student leadership throughout all of the craziness in the pandemic and everything like that.
Yeah. Benny?
Hi, I'm Benny Simon. I'm a professor at Ohio University and finishing my PhD at Ohio State University.
And your topic was?
I think it had something to do with like teaching practices. Is that right?
If you don't remember, Amelia was undergrad experiences and Benny was digital classrooms.
There you go.
The topic. There we go. Suki?
Yes, I might need you to give me the topic as well. I'm not quite sure what it was. However, I'm in Phoenix, land acknowledgement, the Acapulco Otham and the Tohono O'odham Nation. And I am currently the pedagogy chair for the Institute for Dunham Technique Certification, and I serve on the board of the Arizona Dance Education Organization, and I go with she, her pronouns.
And Suki was talking to us about leadership. Zayn?
I totally just looked up. I went back to the group and tried to figure out which one I was doing. So we talked about writing and publishing last year. My name is Zayn Mcneil. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. And I am an independent scholar. I do a lot of different kinds of writing. I'll focus on activist scholarship.
Lewis?
I'm Louis Kavoris. I chair the dance department at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. This is number 28th year as chair. 30th year here at the university. I go by he, him, and I was Eric Hawkins' dancer. So I studied with Hawkins and danced in his company.
Wonderful. And you were also on the leadership panel. Melissa?
Hi, I'm Melissa Yes. I use she, her pronouns. I'm coming to you from Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm a visual artist and academic type.
And you spoke about adjuncting.
Yes, and blended careers.
Yes. And Rebecca?
Hello, I'm Rebecca Salzer. I take she, her pronouns. I'm in rainy and thundery Tuscaloosa, Alabama tonight, so let me know if the rain and the thunder gets overpowering. This is the unceded land of the Creek and the Choctaw tribes. And also, the University of Alabama is housed on what used to be the Mars family plantation. So I think that's important in the chain of who was here and who built what allows us to make what we make. I teach at the University of Alabama. I think I said that, with a specialty in dance and technology. I make screen dance, and I run a program through the NEH called Dancing Digital. And I also run something at the university called the Collaborative Arts Research Initiative.
And unsurprisingly, Rebecca spoke about collaboration. Oh gosh, I promised that I would start off with a prepared question. And so I'm going to ask you, and you can just popcorn in, what were some of your biggest successes and challenges of the last year? Did it reflect your experience that you thought you were talking about, if you remember what you spoke about?
I'll just share that I'm grateful that my mental health is still relatively stable. it was a doozy in a lot of ways, not just for me, not just because of the pandemic, which was a backdrop of, tragedy, but for taking on too much work, some personal tragedies, all kinds of things. So I spoke about blended careers and working as an adjunct professor in addition to other jobs that you must have if you are adjuncting. And I come to you now with a plan for a career shift. So I feel like that's significant.
I'll pop in. For us, for me, the biggest successes is probably that, early on when the pandemic hit and we were all sent home, then we came back and we were allowed to do 50% of our classes. Our university ended up with only 20% of the classes on campus meeting, and about 50%. So all of our studio classes. So for us, that was one of the biggest successes. When the pandemic hit, we kind of came up with a motto that we're still dancing. So that was a big success, that we kept dancing the whole time and kept things going and alive. I think one of the successes was not in what we couldn't do during a pandemic, but focusing on what we could do at this time and what we could train. And I think we even found successes, like some of us felt perhaps we were training artists. And we even when things were at their worst, when we felt like we weren't teaching partnering, when we weren't teaching some of the skills that we wanted to teach, we felt like we were teaching other things that were really valuable. Other successes for us were just like really increased viewership because we put things online for people to see. So there were concerts that typically had 1,000 people see them that now had 4,000 and 5,000 and 6,000 people. So some of that was really good, and also a focus on digital media. Like, I think it was like a good kick in the pants to like finally look at dance for the screen and take it seriously, and not just say, well, we're only interested in live performance. Yeah. So anyway, so those were some of the biggest successes for us.
I'll chime in with maybe like a really broad one. In hindsight, sort of in reflection, I think one of the biggest challenges that we ran into was just the idea of like legitimacy, the legitimacy of content and what we were delivering, and in a way that was actually a success, because it really forced us to sort of look and reframe what it is to do a BA program. Like what kinds of skills are we actually teaching, and what is actually useful in this new ever-changing world. And I think that was very helpful. It was very difficult, but it was also very helpful, not just for the faculty, but also for the students to sort of, there's an expectation of what a legitimate dance degree is supposed to be like. And when it wasn't that, we all had to sort of figure out how to say, like you were just saying, Lewis, like we're still dancing. It just looks and feels differently, and therefore, but that can be just as legitimate as what we were doing before. So that's sort of my reflection.
I can agree, Rebecca. Together we are in the same boat. I know a lot of things that you just said that felt really relevant to Alabama's experience. One of the things that I think was mentioned was we as students got to kind of deconstruct things that kind of just get swept under the rug. Like some of our greatest successes were taking down things that had been established for years and years and years, and being able to kind of step ahead of it and be like, we have 5 things when we typically had 1,000, and we can make those 5 things really, really good. So we had to really examine leadership and fairness and who got to emerge. We had more kids audition and come to Alabama than ever before. And I think a huge part of that was because the kids that are chosen to recruit the program showed what a legitimate dance degree really can be, and kind of allowed the things that we were already doing, like an emphasis on film and technology and that kind of stuff that we were already kind of doing, to come to light and bring forward, like, this is something that we need to consider, not something that's kind of just an option. But as a student, I think we really took the time to look at what we were able to do and deconstruct it and realize like who's being heard, what systems have we just kind of put in place, and without all the glam of performances only, we got to kind of look at the way that things were orchestrated.
Can I add to that? Because I totally agree with everything you said, Amelia, and kind of just riffing off of what Benny and Lewis said as well. In a totally non-dance specific way, I feel like there's so many things that we've been told were impossible that just happened over the last year and a half, like free healthcare, for example. Like, right? Like our government has stepped up to provide free COVID vaccinations to every, there are all these things that, unlimited internet, things that we were told, oh, no, that's not possible. And then all of the different ways we discovered to work. It does feel like it cleared the decks or shook up. As everyone's been saying, our value system in a way. So that I think has been liberating.
Mine's a little different from everyone else because I am not in the dance program and I've been out of college for a good while, both teaching and being a student. But in writing and editing and publishing, it was a really difficult year, especially at the beginning of COVID because of the supply chain issues. And so of all the projects that I had with publishers ended up getting pushed back about a season or a year. And so but at the same time, with the stimulus checks, so many people were able to write full time, right? Like I had this great opportunity to do freelance journalism and academic writing for about 5 months because of that. So even though some of the larger book projects got pushed back a year, it's almost like it didn't move forward. There was still a lot of time to figure out what I liked writing and having the opportunity to do that outside of like forced labor.
It's interesting to think about the pandemic in a couple of different ways, not just the immense tragedy and loss of life and then administratively like budgets and everybody's dealing with stuff, but it also, I think you can think about it as like an accelerant. Like these things were kind of a lot of the stuff that we've been doing, like it's been simmering for a while. It's difficult to get over the administrative hurdles and things like that. And then suddenly I can spend $50,000 on equipment, and it's just like accelerated a lot of these things that had just been sitting in committees, I think, for a while in some ways. On the flip side, a challenge that I'm seeing is that why is it? So the question like I had is why is it that I can spend $50,000 on Zoom equipment and I can't hire an adjunct, or I can't like open a new line. So I think those are things where we're sort of realizing the effects and the ramifications of all of that accelerated activity. I think is interesting. So there are new challenges I think that have arisen.
Yeah. And Suki, you didn't answer the question, and I know you're kind of sat on what happened to you. Do you want to just put it out into the conversation now?
Okay, sure. So I would say that there were some successes associated with the downfall of the GCU dance program. I consider it dead as a doornail now. We had students come back in the summer, having lived through the summer of 2020, just like the rest of us, and their anxiety was peaked due to many things, but social justice issues being one of them. And we had some things happen in our department that ultimately led to a staged protest. So speaking of these opportunities, we had a live stream of our Winter Dance concert on YouTube. And because our dean had just censored a piece about social justice, the students stood in protest, and I was physically there, but I did not stand in their way. I did not go to the control booth. I let it happen. I didn't participate in the silencing, and one of the faculty member, the choreographer, was fired the next Monday, and then I was fired the following. So, and in the middle of that, you know, it was a firestorm. It turned out being a firestorm on social media as well. And those 8 days before I was fired, I was panned broadly in my community for what my part could have been. And then I knew already at that point, I had moved my things out of my office. I knew that I couldn't stay there. And I knew I had said the thing that would ultimately lead to my firing. So it just was a matter of a HR investigation going on. So let me also just mention that I work in Arizona for a private for-profit nonprofit split university. It's at will employment in a right to work state. And being that it's a private institution, they don't have to give any explanation. If they don't think I'm following the mission, that's what they say, and that's what they said. And I was fired coming off of hiking one day. So I spoke to the provost, and he told me right there. And so here's the thing: my students are still on my screensaver from GCU because I refuse anything that makes me feel frustrated about their actions is quickly dissolved when I think about our administration. So all the ire, all of the anger needs to go towards them. And in fact, I took an action that felt really good with I told you I was a board member of the Arizona Dance Education Organization. Our board wrote a letter to the president, and we requested a meeting. I actually recused myself and wasn't on the letter, but we wrote about it, and we said GCU promises to develop global citizens, and we celebrate that statement. But it also means that students should be able to utilize their right of free speech when they endeavor to create artistic work that shines a light upon themes that are relevant to their lives and relevant to them. It's this reason that we are charged with upholding diverse perspectives and challenge ourselves to adjust our practices when we don't get things right to fit the needs of our community. So to be on a continuous path towards growth, and that we want to hold the GCU dance community to that standard as well. GCU was not accredited by NASD, but I did quote the NASD standards as well. So yeah, that's where things landed. It was disastrous in a way. Did the students get their voices heard? Perhaps, but they were also immediately squashed with the actions that the administration took. So that was really tragic and very, very unfortunate. I wonder what those kids will take away from it. I'm sure they learned something.
Are they left now without a department? Without classes?
They have an interim director, and they currently have an interim dean too. And they lost most of the adjunct faculty in my department because they left when I was fired. It was in the newspaper. You can check it out. I created a short response video. And so, I'm still thinking of ways I can be an activist and artivist, but I'm also, moving on to the next thing. And the students are too. So it was successful in a sense.
Yeah. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
So sorry. I mean, universities should have taken the opposite response. I mean, we're supposed to be a place for a universe of ideas and points of view. It's really too bad.
Well, so it started, it seems like it happened out of the blue, but what happened was there was a faculty member who was approached by a student about having a race and reconciliation meeting. And the faculty member obliged, and they went ahead and had it. And 2 letters resulted, from one from a grandparent and one from a student themselves. They went to the president's desk, and then the president blew up. He didn't like what was in there. Apparently it was some incendiary stuff. I never saw the letters, but it basically accused them of liberal indoctrination, of our faculty of doing. Here's what I think. I think ultimately the fact that there was a meeting on the topic of race in the piddly little dance department, because they kept on confusing the dance department with the dance team during my HR investigation. That's how I know this. It just was not a topic that was fit for us. And how dare we? So, I mean, it didn't matter what was even said at the meeting, if you ask me.
I know that we've all been in various departments having various attempts to have these conversations. And I know that a lot of us went back to our worlds with this really strong determination to speak out on subjects of activism and like subjects of diversity. I have felt personally like I've had space to do that. But I'm also aware with the challenges around critical race theory, and specifically as an out queer instructor, I have faced also censorship and pushback and attempts to control what I can say. And I wonder what that balance has been for the rest of you. Like, what has been your freedom to speak, and what have you felt? What are the obstacles that have come up in the way of holding to those standards that we put before ourselves last year?
I mean, I would say I teach at a university that was very open to having a discussion about what was happening in the world. I went to the dean early on and said, I'm dropping all of the marketing for our season, and our season is going to be called the Season of Change. And we're going to encourage people to make dances and speak and move about what's happening in the world and how we want to shape the world. And even if it's you're making, I mean, we even talked about it with faculty, because even if you're just making a dance that is a dance, it is often about harmony, and it is about the things that help us function in the world. So that was a positive thing. We also created an equity inclusion task force, and I was kind of disappointed because I was kind of strong-armed to become the chair of that committee, and others felt, I felt like there were other voices that needed to chair that committee. I mean, I'm a gay white man, and I thought that there were some other voices that really could have been there. But I also felt, and it's one of the things that I communicated, to our dean, it's just because we have a committee now doesn't mean we're now equitable and inclusive and diverse. This goes beyond just having conversations. What are the actions that we're going to step? What it's like any choreography. What is the first step? What is a step we can take? So I feel good. God, Suki, it just kills me that happened to those students and that happened to you, because it's not the reason so many of us decided that academia should be a place that we want to be in and sort of sink our roots into. And I also feel like these places, these universities can change at any moment, no matter where you are, and you can suffer from any of these kinds of waves of, lack of freedoms of speech.
Absolutely. And I think that it's important to draw the line toward what's happened in this past year with Dr. West, with Nicole Hannah-Jones, and the refusal of tenure for African-American faculty. Angela Davis being censored, just because, certain board members in certain states get their panties in a bunch. And so we're trying to satisfy the stakeholders. I don't know.
I'm seeing a lot of nodding. Did other folks want to jump in on that question too?
I just wanted to agree with Lewis as a student. Like, I felt really frustrated that the remedy for, sorry for New York sounds, the remedy for this was like, we'll just make a committee, because I was leading 3 of the 4 big dance organizations at Alabama all at the same time. And to tell me to amplify the voices, I have 6 Black peers. There's no one to pull from. Like, they were equally as frustrated with tokenism, and they would talk all the time with me like, I don't want to be the spokesperson for the department just because I am Black, and don't come talk to me just because of 2020. And it felt very much frustrating because maybe, I don't know what our demographics are, but it feels like 90% of the dance program is a white girl. So it's very frustrating too, because there's a lot that is outside of your reach too. Like, that's also not necessarily you or the program. Like, it's also where you're placed, and dance as a privilege, because dance isn't a right in every community. Like, there are a lot of different layers to it. And then it turned oftentimes as students to be like, make change, it's your responsibility. But we were the effects of like thousands of layers of inequality. And then when you're mad that the only dancers on stage are white women, there's a lot of reasons why that's the case. And so it felt very like debilitating to be that girl, because it was like, my friends and I fortunately had these conversations before this year, but we were just kind of stuck. Like, there were a million reasons why we were in this place, and to make an inclusion committee and pick the one Black professor as the head of it, that doesn't fix anything. Like, and we all just saw right through it.
Can I jump on your point about demographics? I'm seeing this is an interesting thing happening here at Howard University, and probably a lot of other places, in the sense that enrollments are dropping. It's sort of the intertwining of demographics, finances, and admissions, and we are starting to just accept almost everybody, basically, and it's it's a push from the administration, in terms of just upping the numbers. What that's actually doing, or very slowly, but probably going to speed up, I think, is it's forcing us to look at our curriculum. So if we have a much more diverse, larger, bigger population of students, it puts a lot of pressure on what it is that we're teaching and how we are teaching it. We have to, if we're going to have a much more diverse body of students, we have to be able to serve, to your point, Millie, like all of those students, and our curriculum does not do that right now. So I'm really curious to see if, like, the thing that I get so frustrated with, market forces, economic realities, may actually push us into a position where we must make some of these changes in a way that is not happening inside of these, like you said, like, I'm on a couple of committees that I don't think ever met, to be honest. So I don't know if anybody had any thoughts about that.
I'm going to jump in. Oh, Louis, just a second. I'm going to jump in briefly and say we are at 7 Central, 8 Eastern. So guests, if you would like to add voices to the conversation or drop questions in the chat, you are more than welcome to do so. You are also welcome to turn your cameras back on. So I'm going to allow you to do that now. And one thing, Benny, that I wanted to add to what you were saying, something I suggested is there were courses to teach people West African dance, Dunham technique, details about like Black Southern culture. And I asked if diversity funding could be offered to have professors go to those classes, because there are things like I am trying to teach myself, knowing my ignorance on the subject. I want to learn more about Mexican American history because it's an absence in my dance history classes. But just where are the courses available? And I'm struggling to do my own professional development, and the understanding that professors need to develop alongside their students in order to better serve their students is something that I think we could look more closely at, to meet these like new market forces, because it cannot be the case that you just have to lose your job if you don't have the knowledge. There have to be opportunities to like learn from these populations, and learn more and diversify our own professorship, as well as just being told, improve. We're going to give you no resources, but improve.
Even just the superficial stuff of requiring ballet for every single person that comes through your dance program every semester, like investigating why you're forcing those specific styles to be seen more than others. Like, we don't have a tap course at Alabama every semester. That's offered like every other spring by Stacy. That's not something that we really incorporate. So now that you've started teaching, Fen, I didn't take dance history prior to your teaching, but I understand a lot more about all of those histories, but it's not reflected in what I'm able to take. So then I learn about all of these amazing multifocal things, and then I go take ballet. And it's like, okay, well, we're almost there. And then when the students present the same work that they've always been presenting, like you're saying, it's because we're not all advancing together.
I have a thought, but I'm really curious what Lewis was going to say.
Oh, I was just going to say right now, from everything I've been reading, universities are going to be in trouble because there's also actually fewer fish out there to attract into our universities. You know, like it used to be that, you know, the population was kind of growing out there. I think we're in a kind of mess. We're in a natural decline. Plus, I think we're sitting on, I mean, when I looked at Fen's question of what were the challenges and what are the challenges, one of my biggest challenges this year is when we come out of this, and I think a pandemic is a really marking, how do we build the university of tomorrow? You know, and how do we start, and how do we get the resources to do what needs to get done at these universities and to change things? Those are the hardest things that I really see, you know, so yeah, it's that I think about a lot. You know, these universities, I don't think we can continue the way we've continued.
Zayn and Melissa, as folks who are like looking at this from maybe a slightly more externalized perspective, what is your impression of like the situation with maybe art and activism and the work it's got to do right now?
I spent most of the past year working for NGOs. I can't speak as much for art and activism, but I was working at a animal welfare NGO during last summer and then into the fall. And we had a lot of discussions, right, about how our communications could be seen as, you know, race baiting or carceral. And there was a lot of internal discussions about, you know, what if DEI is just performative, you know, if it's just virtue signaling, or what actual true institutional change looks like. And yet, while those conversations were happening, the workers worked to unionize, and they successfully unionized. But during that and after that, many people left because of union busting tactics. And so it's been very interesting, because the main thing there that they wanted to unionize for was because the management and the board weren't doing enough for true diversity work, just wanted to hire an outside consultant and then just put it on their website and move on, right? And so I think that is very similar to the stories I've heard in academia as well. It's how all these larger institutions are trying to capitalize or profit even off of this interest in DEI.
Yeah, for my part, I don't know that the academy has much to do with activism anymore. I confess I'm a little bit disillusioned. You know, Benny mentioned the sort of complex scenario of funding and recruitment and all of and curriculum. And as someone who now works in an R1 institution, but who has also lectured at a community college, I have concerns about bringing people into college who aren't ready to be there, or who maybe think they should be there when actually they might be better served in another path. Because I left that lecturing job at the community college, not just because it didn't pay me anything, but also because I felt like I was playing into a system that was predatory and that was getting money from these students who it just felt really unethical to me. And I worry about our R1 institutions and other universities kind of heading in that direction. I've talked at length with my boss about this issue that has come up tonight about, you know, there was a drop in birth rate, you know, 18, 17 years ago. So we're ready to see a drop in enrollment numbers. And I worry about us tailoring our education to sort of force more people into a system than who actually need or want to be there. So with all that being said, like for that and for lots of other reasons, I'm taking a pivot away from art academia pretty soon here. But I do find still that art itself has a big role in activism. I'm not really sure what my role as an artist really is, except for the opportunity to incite conversations with people, and conversations that might not be had without the gentle initiation that an art experience might offer. But I do know that the time I've spent running a nonprofit organization, art organization in Birmingham, has been probably the most rewarding thing with regard to, social conversation, social justice, and that is merely giving people a platform to express their point of view, whether it's giving an artist an exhibition so that one voice is heard, or whether it's an opportunity again to initiate conversations that need to be had, and to challenge some of the thoughts and biases that we all carry in our communities, creative and otherwise. So I'm sorry to say that to all of my academic friends on here, that I'm disillusioned, but alas, that's kind of where I stand right now.
I mean, you're allowed to be there. Rebecca, I see you kind of sat there processing. Would you like a moment to kind of put your thoughts together and add to what we're saying so far?
I think I'm just going to keep processing for a minute. I'm not sure. I'm loving what I'm hearing, and I'm not sure that I have anything helpful to add.
I think what Melissa said gets to what Lewis was saying, like, we're not serving the needs of the student, like of who is coming to college in the way that, and so is it possible for, because I'm also, I'm embedded in two different academic institutions right now, and both of them are frustrating in different ways, but also generative in different ways. But like, what can we do something about it? Like, I feel like perhaps this upheaval is perhaps an opening to getting people to listen a little bit more and to be a little bit more open to change, because people who have been doing the same thing for 30 years suddenly had to do something very differently. Mm-hmm. And we experienced some of those people decided, I'm not going to do that, and left. And other people said, no, I think I can figure it. I think I can do something new and different. And if that feeling we can continue to foster that kind of willingness to try some new stuff, I think it's good. And I'm super interested, Rebecca, in what you are up to in terms of the digital stuff. One of the things I'll share like a practical thing that came out of last year, if that's okay. So I teach one of the dance survey courses, like a GE course. It's like everything, it's one semester, here's everything, you kind of shove everything in. Very challenging to sort of like get a critical eye inside of that. But when we took it online, suddenly I was like, hold on a second. We're looking at all of these different dance forms. I have friends that do all of these things. So Fridays was technique day with a practitioner from the culture and training of whatever we were doing from different parts of the world, who came in and got to let our students embody it, that particular technique or form, with someone who actually does it. That was not something that was part of any of those survey classes before. It was sort of me trying to I'm not going to do this dance because I don't know it. I'm not part of this culture or anything like that, but this is what it looks like. Check out this video. And then nobody really understood it. And it was very successful. And that's something I want to hang on to from the sort of pandemic times. I've just, set up Fridays is going to be the Zoom in the experts and the practitioners day. And it sort of enlivened some of the students who were taking that course, who were of a quite diverse group of people, because they were from all different sort of majors and countries and things like that. Maybe those are some ways that, I don't know. I don't know. I'm curious. Is there anything that anyone did like last year that like, I'm gonna hold on to that because it worked really well?
We created an online course and we created it collectively. So it wasn't just one teacher who has one experience and one point of view. When someone took that course, they got to meet the entire faculty plus so many artists from Las Vegas and the world, talking about the subject matter. That was really successful. And when you think about it, it's like things like that make me think, we need to rethink what is a course. And more courses could be like that. And more courses could be team taught, more courses could be 8 weeks, more, there's just a way that we've always functioned, and should we always function that way from now on when things go back to whatever normal is,
and how those things are evaluated, grading and
yeah.
It seems like a good moment. One of our guests had a question in last week's talk on accommodation and disability. There was a strong request to keep hybrid events going. Will you be continuing hybrid or digital performances and classes?
So I'd like to speak for my institute, the Institute for Dunham Technique Certification. We have our intensive this week coming up online. We chose not to have an in-person conference, and we started bi-weekly donation-based online courses last year, and we're continuing them for as long as people still demand them. So yes, absolutely. I think it's very important.
This is kind of unrelated, and then I promise I'll step back in over my ears a little more, but just because everybody's I had a very unique situation because I was a student during this, but also a prospective student during this because I was looking at graduate programs, and I had 9 lined up that I was looking at, and I actually ended up on a phone call with the head of Columbia, and I was feeling more empowered than a typical year to be a little bit more challenging with them, I think, because of everything happening. And I remember having a conversation with the chair, the head of the arts admin degree, and I just kept pushing and asking like what changes are being made. And through that conversation, the only answer that could be given to me was that the tuition was going to be cut a little bit, like it was going to be like 5% less. And I said to her on the phone, like, it's very challenging to claim this view that you hold accessibility as one of your most important things, and then take the students that are qualified to come to your program and make it inaccessible to them. Because like for me, I could not pay for that. I have a single mom. But if I'm qualified enough to get in, and you're saying in the wake of all this injustice, you're going to decide that accessibility is important, how do you completely negate that by still charging $70,000 a year for a program? So I think accessibility is like the biggest thing that I maybe before didn't necessarily think was like the most important thing to me. But whether it's hybrid classes or tuition or who you're touring to or what students you're sending, recruitment emails to, that was something I started paying like very close attention to, because regardless of my financial situation, I'm still a white girl. And then all of a sudden I was like, well, who are these emails going out to? And where am I starting to see these advertisements? And what do these professors look like? So all these high ranking programs that I held, in the like top of my brain, all of a sudden just kept falling, because same things happened with NYU. They were just like, we have connections. And I was like, that's not enough for me. So I think it just highlighted things that before would not have been as important. So it's interesting to see what universities are doing in terms of accessibility on the other side of it.
This is just kind of in line with the ways that I'm looking at accessibility of dance knowledge, essentially, throughout the country and the world. One of the reasons that I am interested in this problem is that we have a very hard time. If you teach outside of an urban center, it's very hard to show your students some of the work you'd like them to be able to see, show them a range of work, unless you have access to videos of that work. And we have some, there is change. The pandemic has really, I think, shifted things faster than the dance field has been prepared for on a number of levels. But it's still the case that if you want access to a full-length recording of many, many important dance works, you have to physically be within the walls of the archive that holds them. And so that's a massive accessibility issue that I'm interested in looking at and working on. Even collections that have gotten giant grants to digitize their holdings have then had legal teams stop them from making those accessible across geographical lines. And it happened to some extent, people turned to screens when everything shut down, but we've done it in ways that are either untenable for educators and scholars. In other words, from Friday night to Sunday morning, we're going to show this work that you want, and then it's going to be inaccessible to you again. But also so there's sort of a double-edged problem here. One is we get to see this gem. We don't really have access to it on a continuing basis in the way that we need to have it, to teach and to study it. But also there's no compensation for the artist in that. So we're setting up a precedent that we're setting up all sorts of bad precedents with it and doing it just out of panic. So anyway, I hope that kind of dovetails in with what we're talking about with accessibility. But as a footnote to that, in looking at what resources are available online, most of what universities contract to have access to feature overwhelmingly the works of white men. Overwhelmingly, we just did a quick survey of Alexander Street, On the Boards, and Jacob's Pillow, just those three resources. And actually On the Boards was pretty okay. They had some balance. We just looked at gender, and in a very not progressive way. We did not contact, we did it in a binary way, and we did not contact the artists to find out what gender identity they would choose. So it was a quick and not sufficient look. But on a very quick look, we could see that most artists that we understood to be male from our point of view, not only were there more of them featured, but each male artist had more works featured on each platform. So that's a very superficial and cursory and not sufficient look at how people are represented online. But it was a start for us to even just do that initial survey.
I want to point out we're coming into the last 10 minutes, and I think this question of accessibility is hugely important. But I also want us to think about, like, what are your goals, plans, aspirations, hopes for the next year? Having had a year of experience of what this world might be and what it can do, like, what do we do next? What is the first step of the choreography and the actions? And I'm going to put that to all of you, I think.
I think what's been most interesting to me this year is that everything I thought I understood about the world wasn't true, right? How much I realized everything was constructed, how we understand time is constructed, right? When everything just stopped, how, hours felt like years, how everything I thought was stable wasn't stable. And then it also, like you were saying, put things into question of things that we were told could never happen for 21 years. Like any kind of economic sustainability or help from the government was actually possible. And so watching all of that be sort of erased or forgotten, or the government trying to backtrack from it, has been really ridiculous to watch, and then especially in the past year, in addition to COVID, which is inherently tied to, zoonotic diseases and animal agriculture and factory farming and But then you'll see all the things caused by environmental climate change, right? California just having a longer on fire all the time, the ocean literally on fire. And so it's almost, because I've been working in advocacy now for over a decade, and to see where we are now to where, you know, we were told we would be at this is like the what would be worse. This would be like the world is ending kind of tale that you would have heard in 2000. And so it's been really interesting to me to try to reevaluate what I think is important to me now that I think we're probably past the point of no return. You know, we can talk about what changes we want to make, but the world is literally ending. And things that we understand as normal or stable can be changed in 1 minute. You know, everything that you think that you can plan ahead for obviously can change right away. And I think partly that's very terrifying and disillusioning. But partly it's really empowering because you get to reevaluate what you think is important to you and what's important to the world. And so in the next year, I've been trying to figure out what impact is best. Because I used to think that archiving voices and raising voices in books and literature was something I could do as an activist scholar. But now it almost feels like direct action or grassroots work, or really just interpersonal connection has mattered more to me than anything ever has.
I guess I'm thinking about my students and what they need to come out of their 4 years with a little bit differently, and how I can work inside of the strictures that I have to follow to get them to a place where they can feel like they have a future after they leave the institution, which many of them right now don't feel like they have. So what I don't know, this sort of trying to design my classes this semester with that in mind, which I think has a lot more to do with listening to what they need and not and sort of crafting stuff around that instead of just taking the previous syllabus and, this was made 10 years ago, I'm going to do this. So I'm interested in what they need and what they feel like they want.
Kind of on that same strain, like I think what we were talking about earlier, where things were inevitable, like the midlife crisis, I think was very much present as a 21-year-old, like already in college, and everybody kind of goes through that, like, what do you do when you graduate? But I felt like every single person in the program was kind of having a moment of like, what does my life look like? And so now I think they are going to come back. I know for sure that I am, like, I have boundaries, I have expectations, like I'm a lot more sound in what I know I can do. And so in coming back to school, it's like I have a finite amount of time and I have a set amount of things that I want out of this. I think students will come back more empowered than they did before, because oftentimes, like, it did feel like, well, we just have to create a piece for the work because we do the show every semester. Now it's like, what are you putting on stage and why are you putting on stage and who are you casting for what reason? And can you make a syllabus for the fall of 2022 instead of just, oh, I've adapted as I've been teaching it for 30 years. Like, I hope students continue to come, because I know my peers have kind of had to take that mental health like reset and come forward with like expectation and a voice that they've had to do because of either isolation or, other options that have come in their way.
I think perhaps we all have a better idea of the kind of stamina it takes to address many of the things that our students are going through just broadly, and creativity. And so, the creative problem solving that we preach about, that dance education is so great about, facilitating. I think, that's where I'm headed. Is I'll be an outside agitator outside of academia this year. However, I intend to continue considering how to address inequities in my own practice. And so I think all of us have that personal responsibility. So maybe for Zayn to say, hey, like, there's a reason for some hope. We each have our personal responsibility. So just keep the fire alive, keep the fire under our butts.
think one of the things for me is also right now is negotiating as this virus is ramping up in our state, what it's going to look like when we come back, because it's no one ever wants to make a decision until the final moment, like 5-10 minutes before the students arrive. Then they'll say whether, right now on campus, we're all, 3 weeks ago, it's like the pandemic didn't even happen. It's just like if you were vaccinated, there was just a sign that said if you're unvaccinated, you should wear a mask, and now all employees have to be masked again, but now when the students come, they don't have to be. So there's all of this back and forth and mandating and not, can we mandate, can we not mandate? So navigating that part of things right now keeps me up at night, in trying to figure out what the semester is going to look like. Actually, also with a faculty that wants to get back to things, wants to get back to partnering, wants to get back to allowing students to be creative and not 6 feet apart, not in taped boxes on the floor, doing class. So, and then also so much money. I mean, there's always money at the university, but the university is always crying poor. And, if we do have money, can we spend money on departments to do things and to hire people and to change? Because you can't change a department without money, and it seems like every initiative that happens is about, well, let's increase the number of advisors on campus because, faculty, I hate this idea that faculty are poor advisors of students, that we need these, so for me, I feel like I'm fighting an upstairs that is, and I feel like I'm fighting an upstairs that is temporal, too. And, I really don't care. They could fire me tomorrow. It's probably the best thing they could do. Like send me back to the classroom. It's where I like to be anyway. But I always feel like they're just here for a minute. I mean, after being a chair of a dance department for 28 years, they're there for 5 minutes and I'm here for the entire concert, so it's those things that are really frustrating to me. And for me, those are the challenges with coming back, and this idea of what do we do? We've learned too much with the pandemic and with, all the social justice movements. We cannot go backwards. We have to go forwards, and that's what I like about dance. Dance is about action. So what are the action steps, and how do we hold the upstairs accountable for those things and demand those things? I'm sitting on a faculty, also it's been great because when Benny said people have retired, I have had retirements. So like we're going to be doing 2 new searches. So I'm so hopeful about these, searches and bringing in new people and new positions. But we need more than that, because we've grown and we're sitting on the same number of positions that we've had for 20 years.
And there's something in what you're saying, Lewis, because you're talking about, oh, we don't know what life will be like when we go back. We don't know if we can mask or not. And if I rewound to your talk last year, we'd have been saying exactly the same things. We don't know if we can mandate masks. We don't know if we're going back in person or not. We don't. So, and we've done so much, and we've managed to circle back to a position that is not entirely dissimilar than where we were last year. And like, I would love us to do it better. But before I get on from that soapbox, Melissa and Rebecca, I know neither of you have had a shot at this wrap-up question yet, so perhaps you would give us your final thoughts.
Just pulling together, I just love what everybody said. I'm so grateful for all of it. Just making it kind of micro for a second. When you teach a class, it's in some ways a choreography. What do you want people to know and when? How do you want to present this material? And I just feel like the idea, the act of making a syllabus, which is a contract, which says what's going to happen and how, is just ludicrous right now. Like, I may do this, but I feel like I'm on the cusp with students trying to figure this out in all the ways you just said, and in the way that Zayn said so eloquently, in the way that Lewis just said, in the way that, I mean, all of it put together. I feel like I'm on the ride with everybody, and my role in some ways is to add whatever extra I have, being an older person and a person with more experience. But damn.
Melissa, you're muted. I see you talking, you're muted.
Oops. Yeah, just for my part, I have less power to wield in all of this. Is that, I'm not a professor. I'm a staff person who adjuncts. And so I think the way that I am thinking about this moving forward is very granular. And so I'm teaching this summer, and for me this summer it's come out in the classroom, and that what we're teaching in class, I think, isn't just, in my case, visual art. I think that we're teaching a lot more, and for me, just like modeling that is a priority now in the way that it wasn't. So having open conversations about, I heard on the news that the Delta variant is rising, so I'm masked up again, even though the university hasn't told me to. I'm doing this, just being really candid with them without getting too personal, and checking in on their mental health and general well-being more than I would have before. All of these are small changes that I'm making to my approach with students that I hope might make a difference in the way that I can, since, I don't have a say in curricula or anything like that.
Well, everybody, thank you. I'm glad you made it back, Benny. But thank you so much for giving your time and your generosity and your thoughts. Like, this is, I know I've kept in touch with you in various ways throughout this year, but yeah, I know that your wisdom has been things that have helped me get me through this last year. Like your talks last summer were inspirational, and I know that this again has been something that I will come back to and listen to, and it will help me grow in the work that I do. I hope you've gained things from it, but before I turn the camera off, just thank you so much, all of you, for being here and giving us your wonderful time. I really appreciate it.
Ben. Yeah.
Thanks for including us, Ben.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you. And good luck, everybody.
Yeah.
We can do it.